Good evening, everybody. It really is my pleasure to introduce Tom Ruberto, a soon-to-be completed PhD candidate in the School of Earth and Space Exploration here at Arizona State University. Tom is an amazing person, okay, because long before I ever met him, long before he became a geologist and then a geoscience education researcher, he was running not one but two media companies in the Phoenix area. He was publishing a magazine. He was running a media and marketing and advertising company, and got interested in environmental science, interested in environmental public literacy, and from there into the geosciences. So I met him. He had completed a degree at Estrella Mountain Community College and had come to ASU to study geoscience, and had him in a class, an amazing student in my class, and we just shared a lot of interests, and it soon became clear that Tom was definitely graduate school material. So after he completed his BS in geological sciences in 2016 in our school, he did a master's degree with us, which he completed in 2018. And some of the outcome of that research is going to be what he talks about tonight, as well as what he's also doing for his PhD. So Tom does research that involves the designing, producing, testing, and implementing of immersive, interactive virtual field trips, and then evaluating their effectiveness as a learning modality. He is a technologist of great renown, and an amazing teacher, beloved of many students here at ASU in his role as a teaching assistant. So I'm sure we're going to have a wonderful presentation. Tom is doing great work, and it's really my pleasure to turn it over to Tom Ruberto. Tom, you're on.
Thanks, Steve, and hello, everyone. As Steve said, I'm a PhD candidate at ASU. I have my technical review with my committee next week, and if all goes well, they give me a nod, I'm going to schedule my defense for February, and then we'll see what the next chapter holds for me. But as Steve mentioned, I started a web design and development company almost 30 years ago, so I've been pretty literate in kind of content acquisition. So we've built probably hundreds of websites and a lot of photography and video and immersive technologies. And Steve has kind of guided me on how to channel that into geoscience. And the reason I went back to school, my first round in college, I studied math and computers, which led me to starting the web development company. But I've never lost my love of science, and climate change has been under my skin for a long time. And over a decade ago, I started talking about it a little more, and posting on social media, which probably wasn't a good idea. And my own family and friends were saying, "Hey, you're a computer guy. What do you know about this?" So a little over 10 years ago, I signed up for a Geology 101 course at Estrella Mountain Community College. Figured I'm old school, I should at least learn how the Earth works. I'm not sure how I got from that class to defending a PhD next semester, but here I am. And I wouldn't be here without Steve, who I affectionately refer to as my midlife crisis manager. As you can see, I'm a little older than the average student. But really, why I get up in the morning to do this is I'd love to use virtual field trips as a mechanism to help learners of all ages navigate the promise and peril of the Anthropocene. We face a lot of good and bad things, and I think virtual field trips can play a role in that. So I just want to go over a few things. I want to talk about what exactly a virtual field trip is, if this is new to you. A quick high-level overview on how we build these things. And then I'm going to stop sharing, and I'll go off to the web, and I'll reshare, and I'll give you some addresses in the chat if you want to look at them directly. But I have a bunch of virtual field trip examples. And then I want to end it with a paper that I'm happy to say was just accepted by JGE with revisions. And Steve is going to help me finalize that. And hopefully I'll have my first publication in the next few months. So what are virtual field trips? A potential solution for the challenges of in-person. They are at their core multimedia productions. They mix text, audio, graphics, and a bunch of other new technologies that I'll show you. It allows students to experience real-world environments without the cost of actually being there. The literature says they're not truly virtual, but I'm going to show you a couple of things, and we're getting really close. The literature came to that conclusion because at the time you couldn't walk or manipulate elements within a 3D space, and the onset of laser scanners, that's changed quickly. And they still let you interact through participation, and you still do get some of the benefits of in-person. So what's physically in a virtual field trip? Most of the things I'm going to show you and what the geoscience educators understand is these are anchored by high resolution 360-degree spherical images. So that 360 environment creates a sense of immersion and lets you look around as if you're there. And then there are programs for your desktop or online that allow you to lay other media elements on top of those. Such as videos and gigapans and mapping and other things. And I'll show you some of those things as we proceed. So how we build these things, I've spent my last 4 or 5 years trying to understand how to teach students and educators how to build virtual field trips with the goal of getting more quality content available to learners. And I've kind of broken it down into 4 major components. The first, which is research and storyboarding. And you can see some of the things you need to do during that step. After that, you've got to actually go out into the field and do content acquisition. So yeah, I take a few jokes about being a virtual guy and geology needs to be done in the field, but I still go into the field to shoot all of this stuff. And then after you get it, you've got to produce and design this. Everything from color correcting a photo to editing videos to then going into the software platform of your choice and actually building these things. And then the last step is to test it. Most everything that I'm going to show you tonight is browser based. So does it work on the browsers and does everything flow? What kind of feedback? And then we actually launch these things. So I'm not going to dive deeper into all of those sub-elements on each one of those. I will put a link up after this with the actual PowerPoint presentation in case you're interested in diving deeper into this. As far as the camera gear, the things I'm going to show you, I've been involved in building virtual field trips with nothing more than a smartphone and then extremely high-end equipment and everything in between. But essentially, you can use your smartphone for photos and videos or any mirrorless or DSLR camera. A little smartphone microphone goes a long way in making the audio on your videos better. Some situations you can use a light, something as simple as a flashlight. You're going to need a tripod and then some sort of program that allows you to assemble all of these multimedia materials. So, like I say, those 360 photos are integral to the VFT. They're the anchor, as you'll see later. And I've got a list of some of the companies that make these, and they range from Ricoh has cameras that are $199 to Insta that you can spend upwards of $10,000. And in a lot of the things that I've done in conjunction with Steve, our research group has purchased a number of inexpensive Ricoh cameras for the 360 photos, and then the students have used their own smartphones and have built some pretty impressive virtual field trips with just that technology. For those interested, I mean, you can, if you don't have access to a 360 camera, there are now apps and little hardware editions where you can shoot 360s right on your phone, iOS and Android. And I've got a list of some of the apps here. They range from free Google Street View to under $10, but you can just hold up your camera and spin around and it'll stitch it together. And you now have a 360-degree photo that you can import into a software program and start the VFT production process. And I've got a couple of things to show you. I'll go back to my head, and I've got a bunch of cameras here that I'll hold up to the camera and show you. But you can do all of this with a smartphone if you're so inclined. And then won't go deeply into this, but I provided this more as a resource. You know, if this is something that you're interested in exploring, here are a couple of desktop apps. 3D Vista Pro is probably the best one. Adobe Captivate. You can tie into a learning module system. And then there's a bunch of online platforms, and they range from free to $10 to $15 a month, but you can upload your 360s and link to YouTube videos and do overlays and produce virtual field trips. And then on the extreme high end, if you remember the one thing in the literature where they weren't truly virtual because we couldn't navigate through a space, the virtual field trip world is starting to embrace Unity and Unreal Engine, which are very big in the video game world. But those platforms allow you to bring an environment into them, and you know, some are accessible via the web, some of them will be exported as an executable that you can install on your computer. But it's possible now with the right equipment to let students walk through a space, and I'll show you the beginnings of that as we proceed. But this is a ton of research here. Save you some time if this is something you're interested in doing. I recommend for quickness and the lowest cost, Kula or Memento 360. If this is something you want to play with, you can be up and running in a few minutes and start building a virtual field trip. So at this point, I want to share a couple of these things so you know what I'm talking about. And the things I'm going to go before I switch my screens. The research that I'm going to present to you later is use the mystery of Blacktail Canyon, which is the Great Unconformity. And then in conjunction with Steve Reynolds, who's also on my committee, we've done some work on the Grand Canyon South Rim and Sedona and Oak Creek. And then last semester, I led my CC 124, which is basically Geology 102 hybrid that combines historical and planetary. And they actually built a virtual field trip as a group of Tempe Butte, which is on the ASU campus. They had actually gone to the mountain and had to do a lab on it and create a geologic map. So in semester number 2, they actually went back there, learned it even deeper, and then built a virtual field trip for online students and their fellow students that couldn't get up the mountain due to physical disabilities or being out of town or things like that. So I'm going to stop sharing this and switch to a couple of things online. And I'll also put the addresses that I'm going to go to in the chat in case you want to see those. So do this. All right, the first thing I'm going to share, and I'm not sure, you would have to log on, so this one you won't have an address. But this is the mystery of Blacktail Canyon that I'm going to share. So this was developed by ETX, that's the Center for Exploration through, or Education through Exploration at ASU, and that research group main focus is creating digital learning experiences at scale. And I want to differentiate between this that I'm showing you and the next 3 that I'm going to show you. This is what we refer to as an IVFT, and that I stands for interactive, immersive, virtual field trip. The others I'm going to show you are virtual field trips. They're basically very high-end guided inquiries. So students will work off of a PDF or online notes, and they'll be guided through an exercise. This here is built on an intelligent tutoring system. So there's some logic program behind it. And you can see, I can go here and I can type my name. I can take notes on this screen. I can spin around, and it's gonna walk me through just going to keep telling me what to do. It's going to give me some instructions. And you can follow this. And one of the nice things about these, it's asking me where all these things are. It's eventually going to get to a question. And if I don't answer it right, these intelligent tutoring systems can pop up a video of Steve or one of the other people featured in this, and it can correct a misconception before the student goes on. So these are fairly sophisticated, and this is what I did my master's thesis on. So I'll share that with you, the study later. But these are fairly robust. It takes a while to get into it, and I'll provide a link so you can see it. That. Now I want to show you something that's more guided inquiry. This is the Tempe Butte lab that I was telling you about. So students can download the PDFs and print them out and go along with this. But this is student produced. They used some of my equipment, and over the course of the semester, they went to the mountain 3 or 4 times. But you can pop up videos on all of these and play the videos. You can go, there's a thing on the lab deliverables. There's tips on taking field notes. I'm very interested in place-based education. The power of place, I think, is very important in what I want to do. And there's a video of Steve explaining the cultural significance of the mountain. So there's some preliminary things, and then you can go to each field stop. So each one of these features a 360 photo. There's slideshows. We have 3D rocks, and you can navigate to different things. We've got videos floating, and here's a 3D space. So I want to show you some of the technologies that go into this, so you can see. Here I am now. I'm hoping you're seeing Sketchfab, but the students took 50 photos of one of the andesite rocks there and brought it into Metashape and created 3D rocks. So you can look at those. I also want to show you, we're starting to use laser scans. And this is taken from a different Sedona, Oak Creek. But I want you to see what you can do when you combine a laser scanner that also has photographic cameras in it too. So this, I'm going to navigate with my arrow keys, but this literally lets me navigate the scene. So this has created a 3D mesh, basically a CAD object file, and then has laid over photos that the camera captures on top of that screen, that 3D mesh captured by the laser. But one of the advantages of this technology, and I haven't done it here, but this right here is Matterport. And I'm guessing many of you are familiar with this. You've probably seen things like this of houses for sale. So this started big in real estate, and people do Matterport tours of their home, and you can walk through them. But now they have equipment that will go outside, and you can overlay videos and photos on this. But because lasers have measured this area, one of the other things that you can do, a student you can easily measure, the height of a bedrock or some other thing. So this can be exported into Unreal Engine or Unity, and you can now create a 3D environment that a student can walk through in a headset or on their computer. So we are there. It's just that this goes beyond the realm of geoscience, geologies, and educators. There's some heavy programming here. You're basically creating a mini video game. But it'll happen soon. We'll have the ability for students to navigate this space and to pull a rock out and to measure things and pop up videos. So it's a real exciting time about what this technology can do. So that's using the laser scanner. I want to show you also, we use a lot of gigapans. So gigapans are literally what I'm going to show you here. I have taken, get rid of this box, remove that. This is of Moran Point in the canyon. And this is probably maybe 200 photos, and they're stitched together. So basically what I've done is I'm shooting with a long lens. I'm about, half a mile from on the rim from where I'm shooting. I've got a 400 millimeter lens. And if you can see my mouse, each picture I take is probably covering a tiny square like this, and then they all get stitched together. But the advantage of these gigapans, and they're called giga because the images are so large. This picture you're looking at is actually 2 gig, a little over 2 gig. But what that allows me to do is, I don't know how it'll translate on your screen, but I can keep zooming in with an incredible amount of resolution and navigate this whole scene. And I'm still zooming, and things are pretty crystal clear on my monitor still. And you can just keep going. So this is an incredible tool for exploring landscapes. So those are some of the things that we're incorporating into these. This is something that we did in the Grand Canyon, and you can go to the various points. And you can see, the little instructions pop up a text box and explain to students what to do at each stage. You can do slideshows, they can play the video. Some have gigapans, others have walkthroughs. And then we've done something similar for Sedona. And that's the, actually that's that halfway picnic site. That's the walkthrough that I showed you. So here you can see, this is anchored again, you can see anchored by a high-res 360-degree photo. And then you could do the 3D walkthrough. There's slideshow video of Steve Reynolds explaining what's going on here. So again, you can kind of see the difference. These are guided inquiries for students, and they're used by teachers also. And you can compare that to that IVFT, this Mystery of Blacktail Canyon, where I'm being asked questions, my answers are being recorded, and I get a completion certificate out at the end of it. So there's a lot of interesting things that we're doing with these. So give me a second here, and I will jump back into the PDF. PDF, good. Share. There we go. Okay, so hopefully you're seeing back to my PDF and learning outcomes. So all of this is prompted, do these things work? So my master's thesis basically asked that question. So how does achievement of learning outcomes compare or differ between in-person and virtual students? And then what attitude differences exist between the participants? Because there's a cognitive element to this learning, and then there's the affect realm. And that affect realm plays a huge part in how students learn. So why? I'm guessing that I have an audience of a lot of field geologists. So my master's thesis started out with 4 or 5 quotes over the last 100 years that basically say, the person that sees the most rocks in person is the best geologist. And here I am coming along trying to say that maybe in some instances it can be done virtually, but fieldwork is a bedrock principle. It's effective in learning. It's perceived as important. It's valued, and it's a requirement in most undergraduate geoscience curriculum. The positive effect of field trips, you cognitive gain, you get the positive effect on the emotional, social interactions. It's valued by academia. Oh, I had one other, but there's a problem because most students don't accrue any field experience. This study, there was a 60% drop in summer field camps, and this study is dated. I can tell you that went to almost zero during COVID. All of a sudden, my master's thesis, which was in a little corner of ASU's website, living in obscurity, was downloaded thousands of times to see, hey, if we do virtual, are they still learning? The cost of liability has become an issue. It's avoided due to logistics and safety concerns. And then it limits access for students with mobility and sensory disabilities. And the field work often requires additional course fees. So now we're dealing with questions of equity and fairness. And novelty space is a huge issue. It just negatively affects learning. And that novelty space is the idea that if you've never been in the field before, there are a lot of barriers that prevent you from learning. And I'll go over some of those as we get into it, but you can imagine, well, what kind of shoes? I don't own a pair of hiking shoes. Where will I get water? Where are restrooms located? I'm not physically fit. Can I manage the hike? All of these things that we take for granted have an incredibly negative impact on the ability to learn. And that came up in this study. So the study was focused on the great unconformity. So we had in-person students view it from the south rim of the Grand Canyon with Steve Semken walking along the Trail of Time. And then the virtual students did it by using that Blacktail Canyon virtual field trip. So we studied a historical geology class and then geology upper level class 301, geology of the Southwest. And for the same credit, students chose to either do the in-person or the VFT. And like I said, the in-person, they were at the Grand Canyon from rim level, and they had a guided inquiry along the Trail of Time. And then the virtual, they explored the Grand Canyon from river level and then did a guided inquiry. So that perspective also came into play in some of the learning differences that we found. But everything else was, we tried to keep the content as similar as possible in both modalities. And the interpretation of the great unconformity was the highlight of the study. There were some guided, there was some knowledge quizzes and some other things, but the big thing was the concept sketch pre and post of the great unconformity. So here you can see Steve's leading the group along the South Rim. And they're viewing the great unconformity from the rim level. There's also panels along the way and viewing tubes. So this is how they're experiencing the great unconformity. And then Steve, once or twice during this, is stopping and talking about the great unconformity at these stops. And this is an example of one of the wayside panels up close, where they're actually seeing the process of the great unconformity. And then this is a picture of my son filling in for me, actually doing the Blacktail Canyon. But this is how they experienced it. So they went on a computer and did the virtual field trip. And some of the power of this is the ability to do some things that you can't do in the field. So you can see here, you know, we're popping up the ability to pop up images. The students can take notes like they can in the field. Here, answered a question wrong, and I get a video of Steve popping up And then I'm going to have to go back to that question and answer it again to make sure that I understand before I go forward. So this is the ability during the exercise to test my knowledge at different points during the virtual field trip and then correct misconceptions. And you can see here another reason why we think the virtual field students did as well as they did is the ability to do some things on the screen that you can't do when you're on the actual field trip. So overlays showing the foliation and metamorph versus the sedimentary. So there were just things that the software allowed us to do that you can't do necessarily in the field. So for both of the classes that we're talking about, early in the semester, there was a lecture on the great unconformity. So the students had some prior knowledge. They were taught about the great unconformity. And then later in the semester, before there was a weekend where they were going up to the Grand Canyon. So the last class before that, without any warning and with no notes and from memory, they were asked to do a concept sketch of the great unconformity. Then on that weekend, the group went up to the in-person field trip and the other half did the virtual field trip. And again, the first class back without warning and no notes, they were asked to do a post concept sketch. So there were some other things that we measured, but this was the bulk of the study, looking at pre and post. So they both had the same knowledge before they were exposed to it. And then we looked at the post scores. And what you're looking at here is a couple of samples. So A and B at the top was an in-person, and score was 8 out of 17 on the rubric we developed both pre and post. So pretty similar to what they thought the great conformity was before and after. In contrast, the bottom C and D are a pre and post of a virtual student. And although they look similar, the post here has a significant amount of new information. We've got dates now. They're pretty sure of themselves. There's a question mark. We've got foliation being shown. The great unconformity is actually marked. And we've got some rock names and more dates. So our rubric tried to measure for this, and there was a significant pre to post gain. And obviously they weren't all, there was gains in both. But as we went on, the gains with the virtual students were really significant. So this is just a quick, this is pre to post for the four groups. So Geology 102, the IP are the in-person, and the green is the virtual, and then the upper level class. So everyone experienced gains. Both modalities were successful in teaching, but the virtual were the only ones that had statistically significant gains. And those gains, relatively speaking, were almost 3 times greater than the pre to post from the students that were in person. So that's a significant result. This here was expected. Both the in-person and the virtual, they had similar rubric scores pre, and we'd expect that. But you can see the difference in the post between those two. So that was a significant jump. I want to note here that for the upper level class, we ended up in a similar place, but we had a real disparity in the pre. And what we think happened here is this was a geology elective course, and you also was open to sustainability majors and a couple of other groups. And we think that we saw a disposition to do in-person work by upper level geology students. So we think they started off higher because they came in with more prior knowledge. But I want to point out that the virtual students started off significantly lower, but at the end, they caught up to the group that were the geology majors and wanted to go into the field. So this was an exciting result for me. Other thing I want to share with you, I'm almost 90% of the students who did the virtual were more inclined to, they wanted to see it in person. So it wasn't a negative like, oh, I've seen it, I don't have to go there. They wanted to go and see it in person afterwards. So what did I learn? Both modalities help students with learning outcomes. We did a guided inquiry. Those scores were very similar. I shared with you the pre to post concept score increases, but that virtual field trip group, it was 3 times greater. And we talked about the gap and why some of those discrepancies occurred. And then the factors, we measured PANIS, which is positive and negative affect scores. We did pre and post. So are you excited? Are you nervous? Are you anxious? Things like that. And we got everything came back expected. There were no significantly different increases or decreases in the positive or negative, and the scores fell into this PANIS. It's a validated instrument, and the scores were conducive to learning for both groups. So there were no surprises there. The why, though, the responses suggest that novelty space played a major role for the 102 class. They didn't have field experience in why we saw the difference in scores. So they pointed out, I was tired, got up, the bus left at 5 in the morning. There were 25 of us in the group. I was in the back and I couldn't hear the professor. So we got a lot of things like that that suggested that they had difficulty navigating novelty space. It was one of their first times in the field, and they were just inexperienced, and those things impacted their ability to learn. Now, we had similar responses, but of a completely different nature for the virtual students. Their concerns were, will my internet connection be stable? Will my roommate bust into the room and distract me? Will I want to go to the refrigerator and eat? So they had a completely different set of experiences and worries that did not come into play and impact their learning. So these things may seem trivial, but in the end, that novelty space and how they navigate it played a major role in the learning outcomes. And then I think the difference in the scores in the Geology 301, I think what you saw there was that there was a preference for field work by the geology majors. And by the time they were taking a 300 level class, they were probably in the field once or twice, and they got a little more comfortable with novelty space and what to do in the field. So those were kind of the 2 big takeaways there. And then I think I shared with you the difference in perspective. So that came up in some of the open-ended questions. Remember that the in-person group was viewing that grade and conformity from the south rim looking down, and either through binoculars or the tubes, whereas the virtual field trip students, they were at river level, close up. And there were videos of Steve Semken and other professors literally touching the grade unconformity, the contact. And one of the things that I didn't put in here, but I was fascinated by, was in the open-ended responses. We had a significant number of students comment that in the virtual field trip experience, they felt a very close relationship with Steve Semken, more so than they did actually being on the trip in person with him, because it was a one-on-one experience. They were watching a video. It was just them and him. So we're looking at some combination of all of these things, which account for the significantly higher pre to post scores on that concept sketch. So what did I learn? Learning in the field, it's central to geoscience, just is, but not all students have equal access to getting out there. These virtual experiences, the technology is changing, they're becoming more immersive and student-centered. And the bottom line is that for many students, this may be the only practical option to explore these inaccessible places. So I put it in red. I don't want to say that virtual field trips are better than in person or that they should replace them, but I am suggesting that they could be a suitable alternative if you can't get into the field. So that is basically in a synopsis of my master's project. And then for my PhD, this led me to, I'm very interested in the concept sketch angle, and can we bring sketching into these software platforms that you build them? So one of my chapters for my PhD is an examination of traditional pencil and paper sketches versus digital, where they're using an iPad or their finger on a phone or a Wacom tablet or something like that. So I did a pretty rich study on, I looked at geology sketches, actual geologic maps, and then complex concept sketches. And I'm going to report out that there were no statistically significant differences between the traditional and digital drawing. And my goal there was to give some research to the people developing these platforms to say, hey, it's worth the time and expense to develop the ability to sketch right inside a virtual field trip platform. Think of what you can do with Zoom, how you can annotate. If we had a geologic map, a student would be able to draw right over that map within the program. Another thing this led to is, how do we get more of this quality content into the field? So that Blacktail Canyon that I showed you, that was developed by the ETX research group. And these things, there's a team of programmers, videographers, subject matter experts, learning designers that built that. You know, those things could take 6 to 12 months to lay out and build and have a budget of $100,000 or more. So those are difficult to get a lot of those into the field. So I was interested in, can we flip the model and can we teach teachers and students how to do this and still get quality virtual field trips into the public sphere? And we've had some great success. Everything from professional development courses for middle school, high school teachers to teaching students how to do this. They have created some incredible virtual field trips that have been reviewed by subject matter experts and are now being used in classes at ASU and other places. And then my last chapter that came out of this was being a student of Steve's. I'm very interested in the power of place. So I wanted to look into how does this production process impact sense of place? And sense of place has the ability to change your content knowledge and your behavior and your attitude. So I'm happy to report that the students and teachers that went through this production process experienced significant gains in sense of place, to the point where the students that built that Tempe Butte field trip 2 semesters ago are still hiking it once a week. A couple of students started a group to go and pick up trash on that mountain because they learned through Steve Semken that it was a sacred place to Indigenous people. And I'm seeing this across the board, where there's real attachments that are changing behavior from students and teachers that build these things. So I have my last chapter is on that. So that is, in a nutshell, my presentation. If you're interested in any of this, you've got my contact information, and I'd be glad to answer any questions or help with equipment and platforms or best practices. I'm really excited about this. And once again, just want to give a tip of the hat to Steve. I came into this thinking that I wanted to be a climate researcher. That was making me angry. And Steve has done an incredible job of kind of redirecting my focus on where my talents are and how maybe I could best multiply myself and have a larger impact by getting involved in this and reaching more people than I could by just being a climate researcher. So he took an interest in me, and I wouldn't be here without him. I'm very appreciative. And with that, I'll stop sharing and be glad to take any questions.
Tom, that was great. Thank you so much. There is a question in the chat regarding what is place.
So sense of place is an outcome of place-based learning. And place-based learning is a combination of the natural landscape. So think of that Tempe Butte virtual field trip that I shared, and the cultural landscape. So when the students went to learn about Tempe Butte and do their geologic map, they learned the geology of that place, but they also learned that there was a cultural significance to it and it had meaning. So when you combine the natural and the cultural landscape, you in essence have a place-based education experience. And sense of place is a learning outcome from these place-based learning experiences. And sense of place is a combination of the intellectual and emotional attachments that we form to a place. And those attachments then will literally change your knowledge, your attitude, and your behavior. And yes, I had a whole section on equipment, and I have a ton of it here. So yes, let me do that, and I will put my contact stuff up in 1 second. So here's some of the Ricoh Theta I was telling you about. So this is a 360 camera. So I'm hoping you can see this. You can see it's got lenses on both sides. This is one by Garmin, and these are smaller lenses on both sides. The Garmin one, it's a little older, but because it's Garmin, it's got all sensors and locators in it. So this thing will not only shoot your video and your photos, but it knows GPS where you are, it knows your elevation, it knows the temperature. And these are all things you can record, and you can create like a little heads-up display in your videos that track where you are on a map and how fast you were going and changes in elevation. But these are two smaller cameras. And then let me show you for the high resolution 360 images I showed you, you can use a regular camera, a DSLR or a mirrorless, and you can just shoot, every 30 degrees and stitch them together. But this is, Steve likes to call it my softball, but this is a camera, and every one of these holes you're seeing is an individual high-res camera. So you can control this with a phone or an iPad, and it fires all 36 cameras at once and then stitches them together. And this is what I use to create most of those 360 photos you saw. So this will create a 16K or about a 40 meg 360 degree image. And it's quick and fairly painless.
Tom, what does that device cost?
The Ricos start at $199 and can go up to $700 or $800. And the differences there is going to be in resolution and the quality of the photo. Something like the Panono is about $1,000 to $1,500. And then on the high end, this is my InstaPro. So this is a giant ball, and I can control this very far away. It creates its own Wi-Fi. There's six lenses here, but this shoots 2D and 3D photos and videos. So this can create actual 3D content. And most we're starting to do is migrate the things that we're building into like the headsets like the Oculus Quest and the HTC Vive. Now, almost 95% of the content that you see in those headsets is two-dimensional. It's flat because very few people have the 3D equipment or expertise. But if you put on a headset and you're in a landscape of arches or the Grand Canyon, and it's actually in 3D, the sense of immersion is incredible. So I'm getting into the 3D aspect of this and trying to port these things over to virtual headsets. Now, everything that I showed you online, you can view right now in a Quest or the HTC Vive. You just have to click on the little VR icon, but it will be flat. So what I'm trying to do is one of the follow-on studies I'd like to do is not only to compare in-person and virtual, but I'd like to compare in-person, virtual on a computer screen, and then virtual in a headset. And I'd like to know what kind of differences do we see in learning outcomes with that headset? Because as you can imagine, when you're looking on your computer screen like you are now, there's a lot in your periphery. You get distracted. When you have that headset on, you feel like you're there and there's no distractions. So I'm very curious what that outcome would be. And I'm going on through the questions. Any use of drones? I would love to. My son is also licensed, but so many of the places that we go to, I would have loved to have done drone footage of Tempe Butte, but it's too close to the airport. I would love to do it in the Grand Canyon. The national parks don't let you fly. So yes, we could definitely use drones. I'd love to use more of them. We just have to be in a place where we can fly without any issues. And for some of the things that we've done early in the study, we just haven't had the ability to do it. Now, let me put a link up.
Hey, Tom, while you're putting that up, have you, this is Mike, have you contacted or been in contact with some of the community college geoscience folks? They might be very interested in this, but they wouldn't necessarily have the technology or maybe the background to pull these things together.
You know, I haven't yet. I'd love to. I mean, groups like that. I did. I had the opportunity to spend a year with, Steve just put with Dr. Cyan Proctor. She's the one that just went up in SpaceX. But we did a lab on solar energy, a virtual field trip, and she's at a community college. So we're trying to get into that, and they're aware that that link I shared, VFT, that's all of the virtual field trips that the ETX group has developed, and those are free and available. But I put that up there because I believe there's one or two where drones were used, and there's some aerial footage in there. They keep going through. The comment about non-geo majors wanting to go to the canyon, yes. Personal work and other factors did come into play. Some just could not make it because it was a Saturday trip that went up. So you had a lot that were bogged down with assignments, others that had to work and couldn't make it. Hindsight's 2020. If I redo this study, there are a lot of preliminary questions that I would ask that, quite frankly, just didn't think of the first time around. As far as research for virtual biology labs, I believe there's a huge amount of research, but you're seeing these pop up, these virtual labs in biology, chemistry, physics, and astronomy. And Steve may be able to talk to it more, but I think ETX is involved in things outside of geology only with some of the grants they've gotten. One other thing I want to show you, when you start talking about these 360 videos and everything, it creates, all of the things have built-in microphones, the 360 cameras, but there's just stuff that you don't think about. And you go down a rabbit hole of equipment as you get more serious and high end. So think about if I've got a 360 video and I've got Steve in front of me, and he's talking, and I've got a howling wind or the river of the Grand Canyon behind me. When you spin that video around, that audio field better match it. You better not spin and Steve's still in front of you when he's behind you now. Now you're getting into ambisonic mics, which record the entire sound field. They're tetrahedrals and things like that. And then you have to go into a program and sync these things. So there's a lot of stuff. But like I say, some of those field trips, you need a $50 or $60. This is they call it a VR tripod because there's no head. The camera just goes right on top of it. So nothing's blocking its view, no part of the tripod. You can put a simple $8 or $9 on Amazon, and you can get something that will hold your phone. And now you've got your phone in there and it's on a tripod. You can get steady video. I want to show you this. $49 for either iOS or Android, but this is a mini shotgun microphone that goes right onto your iPhone. And all of a sudden now you're not worried about the microphone in your camera. You have pristine audio. And if you buy one of those apps, you can shoot the 360. So you can do a complete virtual field trip now with just your phone. And the technology and software is available very inexpensively. So the research that we've done is kind of on both ends. Just nothing more than a smartphone and some inexpensive apps, all the way up to some higher end equipment, and everything in between. So as you can see, I'm kind of I'm a little nerdy about this, but I love combining the technology and the pedagogy that I've learned from Steve. And it's just watching students build these and then them being used. It's very fulfilling at this point in my life.
Hey, Tom, I have a quick question about students who do this in the lab or in the classroom or on a computer and then go out into the field. Do you see advantages to them going out later after they've done this, the virtual field trips, and then going out and being in the field and being able perhaps to adapt more rapidly to the wide scope of things that are going on around them?
There's a body of literature when virtual field trips were in their infancy, and we're talking the literature referring to PowerPoint presentations and very simple things. And even back then in the early 2000s, they were seen as a way to maybe possibly mitigate novelty space and to be used as a precursor to an actual in-person. And now that the technology is increasing and it's more immersive, Mike, the short answer is yes, you can significantly impact the quality of that in-person field trip by doing something virtually beforehand. And it could be as simple as a few slides on here's where the restrooms are, here's where you get water, this is the terrain we'll be walking on, to diving deeply into the science and giving them some pre-knowledge. So when you're in the field with them, you can pick and choose what you want to talk about in a landscape lecture, or which rock you want to talk about, and not have to cover the entire soup to nuts. So yes, these are, and the paper, we talk about that in the paper that just got accepted with revisions, about these being used as a precursor.
Okay.
Climate change, how would I teach it more equitably? Well, my dream is to create a roadmap of what I call the promise and peril of the Anthropocene. So, climate change, resource depletion, population growth, all of the things that fall under the geoscience spectrum. And I'd love to build virtual field trips on all of those. I'd love to create a roadmap, or 50 or 100 of them, and then take students from either classes, or I'm sure there's similar, we have the Barrett Honors College, and those honor students need to do a year-long thesis. We have many project-based courses in the sciences at ASU. I'd love to work with those students and just fill in a roadmap. How can I teach climate change more equitably? I can't get students down to the bottom of the canyon, but I can with a virtual field trip. I can't show them the melting ice. I can't get them there in person in Greenland or Alaska. But if I can get myself and my cameras there and a subject matter expert, I can get them there via a virtual field trip. So I think the ability to expose people to both the peril that we face and the promise of the Anthropocene, that's what really excites me. And I think that I can do that. I just have to figure out a way to get to all of these places and build these things. But that's what drives me. That would be my passion project, from everything on how CO2 increases temperature to the melting ice and everything in between.
Is there anybody that would like to take themselves off of mute and ask a question of Tom? You should feel free to do so. At least I think you should feel free. I think you can take yourself off of mute. Maybe I'm wrong. Well,
Steve, anything I've left out?
If you press the space bar, it takes you off mute temporarily.
Very good. So hit that space bar and ask Tom some questions.
Anna, we can go to Mars virtually. That's what's incredible. So that's another passion project. You know, that those cameras, they're up there with two eyeballs. They're taking stereoscopic photos every soul. And we can take those images and we can build 3D panoramas based off of those images. We've got Mars experts at ASU, at U of A. We can interview those people. We have photos from satellites. You can build a full-blown VFT on the Mars landscape and actually bring people to Mars. So, you know, the other thing I want to share is this has expanded. This VFT platform as a way of storytelling and teaching. It's gone now well beyond what we initially thought it would in just being used for geoscience. We've done, the School of Sustainability has used this platform. The Cronkite School of Journalism hosted a 2-week summer camp, and we brought high school students to Garfield, which is a small historic area in Phoenix, and they did a virtual field trip on gentrification versus progress. And these high school students interviewed people that couldn't afford to live there anymore versus new businesses coming in. So it's not just geoscience confined anymore. It's this combination of being there with the 360 photos and being able to overlay. It can be used in so many different ways now. So that's very exciting also. And Steve, I'll let you jump in if you think I forgot anything.
Oh, you did great, Tom. Oh, it was, I think you filled it all. I don't see anything to add except well done.
Well, this has really been very informative, Tom, and I greatly appreciate your taking the time to do this. For your information and those who are still online with us, Tom allowed us to record this, and we will put this up at the Arizona Geological Survey's YouTube channel in the next several days. So it'll be there in the event that you would like to revisit it and point other people to it.
And Mike, I'm just putting my contact information in the chat in case anybody wants to reach out. As you can see, I'm kind of excited about this stuff. So if you've got any questions or I can help in any way, just
Tom,
feel free to reach out.
how many, I know Northern Arizona University's got a group doing some of the same things in the Arctic. They're doing these virtual field trips. How many groups like yours and NEU do we see around the country? Any idea?
I don't have a good handle on that. Steve, do you have any input on that?
Let's see, Penn State, Clemson, Stanford, Texas. Yeah, there is a widening community of people working, and they're not necessarily working in the exact same technologies or looking at the same research questions. So it's really nice. We're kind of looking across the whole. There's a lot more to do. Let's just say it this way. We're just really getting started. So
Steve, are they looking at producing products to bring to the K-12 community so that they can really work with younger kids?
Yes, there's some of these things we actually have a program at ASU called Infiniscope, which is funded by NASA, and it is primarily aimed at virtual learning experiences that K-12 teachers use.
Okay.
So, and if anybody's interested in that, it's just infiniscope. I think it's infiniscope.edu or .org. I can't remember right now, but I think it's .edu. Or .asu.edu. Anyway, if you just Google Infiniscope, you'll find it.
Very good.
You can join. You can be a member.
Okay.
And thank you, Chris. I should point out that Chris Mead is also on the line, who's one of the mainstays of the research program on virtual field trips, and has actually also mentored Tom a great deal and deserves a lot of thanks for his work with Tom as well.
And so, I gather this is going to fit nicely in with the grassroots geoheritage efforts that are underway across the country and across Europe.
Yes, we've given some talks on VFTs at geoheritage conferences like the Ph.D. at GSA a couple of years ago.
Steve, I didn't know Chris was on, and I just need to give a tip of the hat to Chris. Chris has been the unofficial 6th member of my committee. And as Steve mentioned, I've been developing websites, and for a while I owned a travel magazine. And prior to getting into grad school, let's just say I was a very flowery and verbose writer. I was not a scientific writer. And Chris has been extremely patient from getting me to write more precisely and help with statistics. And he's been instrumental and was really took the lead on this paper that we are hoping to publish soon. Couldn't have done it without him. So just a quick thank you to Chris too. I've been very lucky. I've been surrounded by some wonderful people. This has not been an easy endeavor at 59 years of age.
Well, thank you so much. If there are any final questions, this is a good time to get them out. Otherwise, we should let Tom get back to his evening and prepare for his testing next week.
Tech review next week. Yep.
Yeah,
Which is essentially preliminary defense.
right. Any final questions? Otherwise, we let Tom go with our great thanks.
Thank you.